Number 1. The Nazi propaganda. By the time Nazism arose in Germany in the 1930s, anti-Semitism was nothing new, not by a long shot. The Jewish people had suffered a long history of prejudice and persecution. And although Nazis perpetuated centuries-old lies, this time those lies would have their most devastating effects. Like never before, anti-Semitism was manifested in a sweeping national policy known as the Final Solution, which sought to eliminate Jews from the face of the earth. To accomplish this, Adolf Hitler and his Minister of Propaganda, Joseph Goebbels, launched a massive campaign to convince the German people that the Jews were their enemies. Having taken over the press, they spread lies blaming Jews for all of Germany's problems, including the loss of World War I. One outrageous lie, known today as blood libel, dating back to the Middle Ages, claimed that Jews engaged in the ritual killings of Christian children, and used their blood in the unleavened bread, eaten at Passover. Using Jews as the scapegoat, Hitler and his cronies orchestrated what they called the Big Lie. This theory states that no matter how big the lie is, or more precisely, because it's so big, people will believe it if you repeat it enough. Everyone tells small lies, but few have the guts to tell colossal lies. Because a big lie is so unlikely, people will come to accept it. Although the big lie is often attributed to being coined by Hitler and Goebbels, there isn't evidence that they actually wrote that this was their strategy. In fact, both men wrote that their enemies, the Jews and the British, used this tactic. Nevertheless, the Nazis certainly practiced the big lie. No salvation is possible until the bearer of disunion, the Jew, has been rendered powerless to harm, Hitler said to his followers in 1922. The end result was that the Nazis murdered 6 million Jews and 5 million other prisoners of war, Roma, gay men, and members of other groups Hitler deemed undesirable. And number 2. The Cuban Missile Crisis. Despite reassurances from the Soviet Union that they were sending only defensive weapons to Cuba, the reality was that their true intentions were to plant missiles on the island. On October 14, 1962, the secret came out when an American U-2 spy plane spotted and photographed numerous missiles being sneaked into Cuba. On October 22, President John F. Kennedy told the world that the Soviets had stationed missiles capable of carrying nuclear warheads just 90 miles off the American coastline.
Good evening, my fellow citizens. This government, as promised, has maintained the closest surveillance of the Soviet military buildup on the island of Cuba. Within the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island. The purpose of these bases can be none other than to provide a nuclear strike capability against the Western Hemisphere. Upon receiving the first preliminary hard information of this nature, last Tuesday morning at 9 a.m., I directed that our surveillance be stepped up. And having now confirmed and completed our evaluation of the evidence and our decision on a course of action, this government feels obliged to report this new crisis to you in fullest detail. The characteristic of these new missile sites indicate two distinct types of installations. Several of them include medium-range ballistic missiles capable of carrying a nuclear warhead for a distance of more than 1,000 nautical miles. Each of these missiles, in short, is capable of striking Washington, D.C., the Panama Canal, Cape Canaveral, Mexico City, or any other city in the southeastern part of the United States, in Central America, or in the Caribbean area. Additional sites not yet completed appear to be designed for intermediate range ballistic missiles capable of traveling more than twice as far and thus capable of striking most of the major cities in the Western Hemisphere, ranging as far north as Hudson's Bay, Canada, and as far south as Lima, Peru. In addition, jet bombers capable of carrying nuclear weapons are now being uncrated and assembled in Cuba, while the necessary air bases are being prepared. This urgent transformation of Cuba into an important strategic base by the presence of these large, long-range, and clearly offensive weapons of sudden mass destruction constitutes an explicit threat to the peace and security of all the Americas, in flagrant and deliberate defiance of the Rio Pact of 1947, the traditions of this nation and hemisphere, the joint resolution of the 87th Congress, the Charter of the United Nations, and my own public warnings to the Soviets on September 4th and 13th. This action also contradicts the repeated assurances of Soviet spokesmen, both publicly and privately delivered, that the arms buildup in Cuba would retain its original defensive character, and that the Soviet Union had no need or desire to station strategic missiles on the territory of any other nation. The size of this undertaking makes clear that it has been planned for some months. Yet only last month, after I had made clear the distinction between any introduction of ground-to-ground missiles and the existence of defensive anti-aircraft missiles, the Soviet government publicly stated on September 11th that, and I quote, "The armaments and military equipment sent to Cuba are designed exclusively for defensive purposes," unquote. That there is, and I quote the Soviet government, "there is no need for the Soviet government to shift its weapons for a retaliatory blow to any other country, for instance, Cuba," unquote. And that, and I quote the government, "the Soviet Union has so powerful rockets to carry these nuclear warheads that there is no need to search for sites for them beyond the boundaries of the Soviet Union," unquote. That statement was false. And I quote him, "Training by Soviet specialists of Cuban nationals in handling defensive armaments was by no means offensive. And that if it were otherwise," Mr. Gromyko went on, "the Soviet government would never become involved in rendering such assistance," unquote. That statement also was false. Friend or foe?
The Soviet Union tried to conceal the missile sites with tarps, nets, paint, and mud, but their attempts for damage control were futile. 6 days later, the president ordered a naval quarantine on Cuba until the Soviets dismantled and removed their missiles immediately. After much intense back and forth, the Russian leader Nikita Khrushchev finally agreed to the terms and took the missiles back to Russia. Although it's unknown exactly how long it took President Kennedy to make his decision, but this decision changed history.